Oh, thank you for tuning in. We've been looking at this series called Meals with Jesus, and today we're going to look at the story of Jesus having a meal with a prominent Pharisee, and it's called The Best Seat in the House. And if you want to have your Bible open for that, it's Luke 14, 1-14, if you want to follow. Something that perhaps you might have noticed if you read the Gospels, and particularly whenever there's a meal with Jesus, you get what I like to call the seesaw effect. If you turn up to a meal with Jesus and you're feeling proud and powerful and arrogant and everything else, you generally get taken down a peg when you encounter Jesus. These are usually the religious leaders of the day, royalty or Herod or anything like that. You get taken down a peg. But for those who turn up to a meal with Jesus or encounter Jesus in another way and who are either sick or sad or scared, they end up lifted in an amazing way. And that's the seesaw effect. And it's there in verse 11 of Luke 14. We see it. Jesus says, "For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." And this line is a phrase that occurs over and over again, right through the Old Testament and into the New Testament, but I'll come back to it later on in this talk. But our passage today is set in the house, as I said, of a prominent Pharisee. And the Pharisees, as you might be aware, are the most powerful Jewish religious leaders of their day. Their role was to study the law and to enforce the law and to live the law as well, to be morally superior to everyone else and make sure that everyone else was trying to live up to their example. And we read there, verse 1 of chapter 14, "One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. And there in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling of the body." Now, when I read this, I thought to myself, who is this man? This whole thing seems very suspicious. Where does this man come from? Whenever Jesus heals someone, you usually get an inkling of who that person is. You know, whether it's Peter's mother or Jairus' daughter or someone else. But you kind of know But this man here, we have no clue. We don't know who he is. We know nothing about this man. He doesn't seem to be any relation to the Pharisees. And after Jesus heals him, he sends him away. He doesn't say, "Hey, stay on for the meal. You know, this is great. Let's celebrate." And so what seems most likely here, and very sad, is that these powerful Pharisees have grabbed some poor chap off the street who has abnormal swelling or the dropsy and used him as bait to catch Jesus. They've put him in front of Jesus. And these great men of religion, actually believe that they're doing the work of God by seeking to catch Jesus out. But in reality, what we find is they're doing the very opposite. They don't actually realize it. And this is the seesaw effect. They turn up to the meal all puffed up and proud, ready to catch Jesus, feeling morally superior in their actions. There's some sins that we like to hide away, and we know are wrong, and it's the sort of thing you do behind closed doors, or do and you don't tell the vicar. They know they're bad, but there are other sins that we do in the limelight, in the light. We don't even know that they're sinful. We think we're doing God's work, and that's a very scary place to be. And Jesus exposes their spiritual blind spot with one question. He says, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? You're the experts in the law. What do you think?" And the point Jesus is trying to make here is that the Sabbath was not meant to be a burden on people, but a blessing. Elsewhere he says, "Man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man." And God commanded the Israelites to have a day of rest. And I want to read to you commandment number 4. That's Exodus 28, if you want to turn briefly there. It says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that's in them. And he rested on the 7th day. And therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and he hallowed it. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you or nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who are within your gates." Okay? Everyone must rest, regardless of social status. People say all the time, the Bible endorses slavery. Well, actually, there's a longer argument there, but basically it's absolute bull. This commandment was instituted by God in great contrast to the Israelites' experience of slavery in Egypt. You don't give your slaves the day off. You force them to work till they drop. And this is nothing like slavery. Now, even the cattle here get a rest. Today we don't even treat our cattle. Industrial scale farming doesn't even treat its cattle this way. And if the cattle get a rest, so the earth gets a rest. Creation gets a rest. And we bang on over and over again about climate change, and that's a good thing. It's a real thing. But what would happen, just hypothetically speaking, think about what would happen if the world were to just stop for a day, for 24 hours. I guess you'd have to work it out over the time zone. But we rested the earth for 1 day a week. Oh, but maybe I wouldn't get my Sunday paper. Or, oh, but I might not get my milk or my bacon. Well, deal with it. Other people are starving. And this poor man, who was meant to be getting his Sabbath day rest out on the streets, is grabbed by the Pharisees and hauled in before Jesus because they want to enforce the law. And it's such hypocrisy here as well, because, they shouldn't be, not even the Pharisees shouldn't be working on the Sabbath, and yet by trying to trap Jesus and using this other man as bait, they are actually working on the Sabbath. So they've completely missed the point of this whole thing. And these Pharisees believe that they are the religious benchmark for everything, but they've totally missed the point of the law. And it's almost like a very bright torch has suddenly been shined in their faces. And as they witness this miracle, they go from the top of the seesaw right down to the bottom of the seesaw. And this poor man suddenly gets the Sabbath day beyond his wildest dreams. He is totally healed, and Jesus sets him free. Jesus actually says, which one of you, if his ox or his donkey falls into a pit, wouldn't you let them go? And that's exactly what Jesus does here. He sets this man free from his oppressors. He goes home healed. And then Jesus proceeds to teach everyone in the room, who at this point are completely silent. You who are proud and powerful, you who come in to this meal and take the seat of honor and watch someone else in the seat of dishonor, you need to reverse that. When you go to a meal, take the seat of least honor. Then maybe you will be pushed up to the seat of honor. Imagine what this must have been felt like. Imagine what it must... I want you for a moment just to put yourselves in the shoes of these Pharisees who would have started to feel like they were at the bottom of the seesaw. I had a similar experience a few years ago. Well, it's quite a long time ago now. It was probably about 1989, and I was on a scout jamboree, and in a place called Midmar Dam. And some of you will know what a long drop loo is. Not everyone, because you live in comfy Jersey. But a long drop loo is basically you dig a 6 foot high trench, and then you put a box over the top, and that becomes your loo for a week on these scout and guide jamborees. And one night, after our main campfire session, I was quite keen on this particular girl guide, And a little point of wisdom is you never try and impress a girl guide near a long drop loo. It just it's not a good thing to do. I asked her if she'd come for a walk with me, and it was dark, and they'd had a lot of rain that week, and some of the edges of this trench had sort of crumbled in, and I didn't realize it. And in the darkness, I didn't sort of appreciate how close I was to this one trench, and I was talking to her. Next minute, I just saw everything went black, and I fell down the long drop loo. I went from the top of the seesaw to the bottom of the seesaw in about 2 seconds. And fortunately, we had this truck called the honeysucker who used to come and suck all the sewage out each day, so the level wasn't particularly high. So instead of actually landing in sort of waist deep, I only landed in ankle deep, which was better than waist deep, except that the girl I was walking with felt really sorry for me and tried to pull me out, which she did, and I was grabbing on the grass and everything else. But you could see in her face it was contorted because the smell was really bad. Anyway, they got me out and sprayed my feet down and everything. But for the rest of the week, I was, kids are really cruel. So I was that bloke, that boy who fell down the long drop loo, and everyone sort of whispers as you go by. That was my scout jamboree. I went from the top of the seesaw to the bottom of the seesaw. The biggest mistake that these Pharisees had made in the presence of Jesus, their sin was all exposed. They had forgotten what God was like. They were supposed to know what God was like, but they had forgotten what God was like. And the lesson that they had to learn right then and there was God is partial, not to the proud and powerful, but to the weak and vulnerable. This verse 11, again, for all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. This is not just good advice that Jesus is giving. This is all about what God is like. And as I said, this theme occurs over and over again in the Bible. Proverbs 29:3. You can go and check this out. Luke 18:4. Matthew 23:12. Luke 14:11. Proverbs 11:12. James 4:10. Isaiah 2:11-12. 1 Peter 5:5 says, all of you clothe yourself with humility towards one another, because God opposes the proud and shows favor to the humble. Jesus is saying you should behave this way because this is what God is like. And then he delivers the final nail for the coffin. He addresses the host of the meal, the prominent Pharisee himself. And he says, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or your sisters, your relatives or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. I have to be honest with you, when I was preparing this, I read this over a few times. What is Jesus actually saying here? How do we interpret this in the 21st century? It's not like every night we're giving these lavish banquets. We're not Pharisees. How does? And I came to the conclusion like this. And they say when you're learning how to preach, you shouldn't repeat yourself. But I'm going to repeat myself a few times. I think this passage means the following. Spend more time with people who have problems that you can't fix. I'll say it again. Spend more time with people who have problems that you can't fix. That doesn't mean those problems aren't fixable, but that does mean that there are problems that only God can fix. This kind of attitude means that things are slow and uncomfortable. You will have to listen, not just provide solutions. You will have to wait. It'll, as I said, it'll be really slow. You'll have to pray over weeks and months. and meet with them over and over again and care for them. And in it, you may have the opportunity to share your faith. But it's very slow. It's not quick fix. And interestingly, you know what happens in all of this? If you truly invest in people who have problems that you can't fix, two things may happen. One, over time, God may choose to fix them through you. Or, over time, God may choose to fix you through them. And we have a church at the moment that has a planning application in place. And we're seeking to create a space that can help you to do that more, can help you as the ecclesia to spend more time with people whose problems you can't fix because only God can fix them. And but I just wanted to do a little case study for you as we process all of this. I want you to picture St. Andrew's Church. And picture what you think is the best seat in the spiritual house of St. Andrew's Church. I think, I'm going to answer this in a funny way, I think that let's start with the worst seats. The worst seats at St. Andrew's Church are the main body of pews in the church. I mean, they are pretty uncomfortable, granted. Those are the cheap seats, if you like. You're the riffraff, you're the congregation, you're sitting there. And then, if you move further towards the front of the church, you go up a step. And then you have the choir stalls. And now you're in the slightly more expensive seats. This is the where the slightly more holy people are meant to sit, slightly elevated above you. But then, if you go right to the front where the altar is, you go up a step again. And there, on the left of the altar, is the glory seat. That's my seat. I'm the vicar. Only I get to sit in that seat. But I want to share with you something that makes me very sad. The problem is that nobody ever sits there anymore. It's a very lonely seat. It's right at the top end of the church. I don't even sit there anymore. And for some of you, coming to faith, there are all sorts of obstacles in your way. Some of you, I know, in our congregation will approach that first step from a very physical point of view. And that first step, although it's only half a foot high, will feel like a 12-foot high concrete wall with razor wire. Physically, you just can't get over that. When I give communion, I have to come down and give you communion in your seat because you will not physically be able to get over that step. And that's why we want to raise the floor. We want to remove the pews and raise the floor so we get more wheelchairs in, and actually that everyone of all abilities can navigate right to the front of church. But for some of you, that step will just be half a foot, and it's just one easy step. Some of you, though, the second step will be your obstacle. It's the step of the heart. It's where I say, come and receive Christ's free gifts of bread and wine. And for some of you, that is such a major step of the heart. Some of you will say, I don't need religion. I'm the top of the seesaw. I've got everything I want. I'm powerful. I'm rich. I don't need this Jesus rubbish thing. And I want to say to you, respectfully, I think you're wrong. I think you do need Jesus. Perhaps you need Jesus more than ever, but you just don't know it. He died for you. He came into the world. He laid his life down for you, taking your sin on himself. Your sin and my sin on himself. If that's true, then you do need him. But some of you might approach that second step and go, I've done things in my life. People in this church wouldn't believe the sorts of things I've done in my life. There's no ways that God could count me worthy to receive his body and his blood. And I want to say to you, actually, respectfully, you're also wrong. Jesus loved you more than life itself, more than all those awful things that you did in your past. Jesus wants for you to start afresh with a new life in him. And you can do that by coming up and freely receiving his body and his blood. And that's what we do on Sundays. So it's the great human leveler. The great seesaw gets leveled out. The road gets flattened and calmed because of what Jesus did. He broke the power of sin and death by going to the cross and taking up his life at the resurrection. And when you grasp this, when you grasp what Jesus did in your life, then, as Paul writes to the Philippians 2:5, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who, being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. He stepped down from heaven and walked in our shoes. Verse 8, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Every encounter with Jesus is an emotional, physical, and spiritual seesaw. But it rips your heart out and rebuilds it fresh. A heart of stone becomes a heart of flesh. Trust him. He's very good. Amen.